Thank you. And thank you to, who was it who called our attention to that? Bumi. Bumi, thank you very much for catching that. We would have done the entire class and we may not have remembered, so thank you. Okay, Odi wants me to walk the class through the assignment. So I'll do that for your benefit, Odi, and for the benefit of any other person who needs that information. So you're doing a presentation, right, to tell us about the problems that your organization is facing. Maybe at the organization level, maybe at a department level, any level, you get to determine it. Alternatively, you can talk about an opportunity. You're in the sales industry. There is a market opportunity for you to grow your customer base by 20% annually. You're not able to do so based on certain limitations you have in your business now. So you want to be able to get to the point where you can take advantage of the available market and be able to get the 20% increase in client base. And that's why I said pain point or opportunity. You get to decide. What the most important thing here is that there is a current state that you're not happy with and you want to work towards a future state. That future state might be that you're eliminating the problems you're facing right now, or it may be that you're taking advantage of an opportunity. Okay? But for you to tell us about what problems or opportunity your company has, we need to know about your company, right? Not just the company name, okay? I mean, your company name for sure. What industry are you in? Is it manufacturing? Is it, sales? Whatever industry your company is. Like I said, you can make it up, but it's better to use like a real case, right? Your current experience or past experience. Tell us about your customer profile. Who are the people buying from you? What does your clientele look like today? What is your market share? Are there competitors that are 20% bigger than you and now you're trying to get to their level or you're even trying to surpass them? Tell us a bit about your competitors as well. Who is your company competing with in the market? Tell us about your brand. What is your company known for? Yes, you do manufacturing, right? But if I'm hearing about your company for the first time, it's also an opportunity for you to market your company to me, right? So, say good stuff about your company, basically. So that's point number one. Point number two. So again, number one is really just introducing your company to somebody who's never heard of your company before. But in introducing your company, you're going to talk about a few different things. Okay, given the time that you have, which is just about 20 minutes, the expectation is not that you dwell on point one and it takes you 15 minutes. Max, maybe 1 or 2 slides to talk about point one. As a matter of fact, in total, I don't expect you to have more than 6 to 7 slides in total. Your slides should not be filled with words. The words you want to speak should be in your mind. And you can have your notes beside you and pick at it while you're talking, but your slide should be the key points that you want to share with your audience, okay? So that's another thing to note. Show 6 to 7 slides, but don't make it too heavy to the point that people's eyes are watery. Not too many words in there. Keep your notes by the side, maybe on your table. You can pick at it. We don't expect you to be reading to us. No, please do not read to us. You need to know what you're presenting well enough that you're only glancing at your notes so that you don't lose your line of thought, right? Point number 2 is where you talk about, okay, now you have our attention. You've talked about your company. What issue is your company facing or what opportunity is there for your company to leverage? If you choose to talk about the pain points, which is the problems, right? For example, an example would be, and anybody can reuse my example, doesn't really matter. An example would be that the application your company is using today is very clunky and not very user-friendly, that your customers, just like I did in the business case, right? It puts your customers off. You're basically not onboarding as many new customers as you could be onboarding, or even existing customers are not happy with the tool, so they're moving to the competitor. That's a problem. An example of an opportunity would be that today you have these 3 products that you sell, and your company is doing excellently well in the market, selling the 3 products. However, based on some changes made by the government, where your head office is located, that city or that place is becoming a tourist center, meaning a lot of people are going to be coming from all around the world to visit that city or that state, right? Now there's a new product your company has discovered that they could sell to this new crowd coming in. But the tool that you use today is not built to be able to support that tool. Support that product, make the product up doesn't really matter. So now there's an opportunity. The opportunity is that you could increase your market share by 20% annually over the next 5 years, but you don't have a tool that can support it. Okay? So again, choose a problem or choose an opportunity, one or the other, not the two, not both. You're not going to have enough time to go to talk about both. And then number 3, let's say you choose the pain point, talk about the impact of the pain point, okay? So for example, your company is using this tool, customers do not like the tool, and even people working in the organization do not like the tool. It takes them really long to be able to complete a task, and even when they complete it, they still don't get all the information that they need. What is the effect of that? The effect of that is that you're losing 10% of your customers annually. If you look at the past 5 years, you've lost 10% of your customer base by, annually. That's an example. Like, we want to know the impact of the pain. And if it's an opportunity, talk about that as well. There's a potential market that we could key into. If we're able to implement what we need to implement to key into that market, this is what it will mean for our bottom line. Our revenue will go up by 20%, and in dollars, that's $10 million annually. We need facts and figures. Something that if you were presenting to your executive director, what would make sense to them? Executive management, they're not touchy-feely people. They want to hear numbers, right? And so put the numbers in there. Put a graph in there if you want to. But look at the flow of what we're saying. Tell us about your company, number 1. Number 2, tell us about the problem or the opportunity. And then number 3, tell us about the impact of that problem or the potential impact of the opportunity if you're able to leverage the opportunity. Don't go into too much detail. You're going to do that in the business case. This assignment 1 is just an opportunity to introduce this topic so that when you come back to talk about the business case, we're not hearing about it for the first time. Okay. Odi, did that answer your question?
Yes, very well. Thanks, Abiola.
Thank you. Titi, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Good evening, everyone. So I'm piggybacking on your response to Odi, right? You mentioned a lot of figures and all of that. Are we supposed to be assuming, or are we going to be actually bringing in some, assumed data? Is still assumptions? And yes. What is the recommended tool in order to complete the quantitatives in the presentation?
Very good question. Make it up, but make it believable.
Okay, in terms of the tool that you use to analyze it, is there something you would recommend?
No, there really isn't any tool. There really isn't any tool. So you have a company today, you have 100 customers, and the 100 customers are pulling in. Through the 100 customers, you're getting an annual revenue of 100 million. If you get 10 more customers, how much more revenue do you think you'd get? 10 million. So there's let's not overcomplicate it. I understand what you're saying, Titi, and that's a very good question, but make it up, but make it logical, okay? If you're coming to us and you're presenting to us and you say, today you have a total market share of 10% in your industry, right? And annually you're pulling in a revenue of 10 million. Tell us how many customers you have that are getting you the 10 million, right? Once you do that, if in the next step you're telling us that you're able to increase your customer base by 10%, then we know you're going to increase your revenue on an average by 10%. So it's just, the most important thing is that once you start introducing the numbers, they need to flow, right? If you're presenting to us and we expect that your 10% increase in customer should bring 10% increase in revenue, but what you're claiming is 20%. We're going to drill holes into that presentation. We're going to ask you, how did you arrive at those numbers? I would ask you anyway. And if you were presenting in real life, they'll ask you as well. So the most important thing is once you start with a number, which is going to be fictional, make sure that number adds up as you're going. There's no fancy tool that I'm aware of that will help you with that calculation. Even when I've worked on multi-million-dollar projects, it's Excel we've used. So we put in the formulas in Excel. Once we plug in the numbers, it would spit out the numbers, right? It's the same thing I'm even still doing on a project that I'm working on now. And then I include that Excel as part of my documentation. So if anybody wanted to look at it, they could take a look at it.
Okay.
Does that help, Titi?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Atinuke.
Abiola, good evening. My question is pertaining to just this answer that you and the question that you answered to now. Is it every time that we make up figures, or sometimes the management give us like an idea of how much the project is going to cost and everything that we're going to work on? Or is it that every time we're going to present, are we going to just make up like figures?
No, yes, so that's a good question. No, in real life, you're not going to make up numbers. The reason you're making up numbers this time around, remember I said use real life experience if you can, but some people have not worked on projects like that before. I don't know what the limitations are based on the group, right? That's why I said it's okay for you to make it up. But in real life, what would happen is that just like, in my response to Titi, let's say that pain points is what you want to talk about. You have an application you're using today. You're able to pull data in the system to see how many errors that application is costing you or how much time is being wasted. Let me give you a real life example. Remember when I talked about the project that I worked on at the insurance company, optical character recognition, right? And we're going to automate a lot of the processes that we had at the time. Okay, so all those people that would receive the paper claim, scan it, sort it, pile it, take it to the fourth floor, all those very manual things, right? What did we do? We listed all of them and calculated their annual salary. That we came to a figure by doing that, right? We calculated the annual salary. And then let's say we multiplied it by 5, okay? Let's say that came to 1 million. Again, it wasn't 1 million, but for the purposes of this explanation, 1 million. Then we looked at the tool, optical character recognition and robotics process automation, and all the people we're going to hire to manage it, right? Let's say that came to 500,000, okay? So to implement it, 500,000, and then annually to maintain it over the next 5 years, 100,000. So in a total of 5 years, that automation would have cost us 1 million, right? 500,000 to implement it in year 1, and actually 900,000. Plus 500,000 to implement it in year 1, and then over the next 4 years, 400,000, right? 100,000 annually. So that comes to 900,000. For the employees who were doing all of that manual work, they wouldn't have to do that manual work every year anymore, right? And those employees were costing us 1 million annually. We multiply that by 5, that's 5 million, right? I hope everybody's following. So the pain point was costing us 5 million. If we fix the pain points over the 5-year period, we would have spent 900,000. So that's a savings of 4.1 million. We were able to come up with those figures because it was what was happening in real life. And that's what you're going to do on the job as well. Now, in reality, we're not really going to save 4.1 million because we're not firing the people, right? We were putting them into like more value add work where they could actually make the company more money. Okay, so we were still going to be paying them salary, but the work they're going to be doing now will generate enough revenue to pay their salaries, and there will still be more left. So at the end of the day, we created this Excel document with so many numbers, but the points at the end of that document was how profitable it would be if we went the automation route. And that's what you're really going to do in real life. So for any group that wants to use real life experience, maybe somebody in your group has worked in another organization where even if they were not a part of the IT project, but they know about the processes of the company and all of that, right? If they have that information, they can share with the group. Please do not share anything confidential about any company with your group. You really should never do that. But they can share some of the experience that they have without going into too much detail about the company. So to answer your question, Atinuke, in real life, you will never make up a number. You should never make up a number. Because this is a training though, and again, I don't know how much experience each group has. I've said make up the numbers if you have to. Most groups would need to make it up, but in real life, no. In real life, you're going to go to the people with that information, okay? Because you're not going to know you will know the revenue. If it's a publicly listed company, it would be on the internet. Anyway, that information will be there. And even if you don't know it, your project sponsor will know it. I keep hammering on project sponsor. Your project sponsor has a ton of information. As a BA, you're going to work closely with them to get that information. So, Atinuke, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I did. Awesome. Any other questions about the assignment? Okay. If there are no other questions, I'll move on to the next thing I want to talk about. So we've had 3 classes already. We're going to have class 4 today. And I've shared a ton of information with you. And I know somebody, at least one person is thinking, okay, but as a business analyst, right? At what point do I apply what? Like we talked about increment and iteration yesterday. What does that mean in real life when I'm working as a BA on a project? Okay. This is what I want to add. Almost everything we've talked about, almost everything, including iteration and increment. When you begin to work as a BA in an agile environment, the expectation is that you know what these things mean. Having said that, nobody is going to walk up to you and say, tell us about an increment. I mean, maybe in an interview, they might ask you, but on the job, that's not how it plays out. On the job, they're going to say, this is an agile project we're working on. We need to plan the scrum. In each scrum, they begin to build incrementally and iteratively. But they're not going to ask you as a BA to say, what is an increment? That's not how it works. However, when you as a BA walk into a meeting, for you to be able to make sense of what they're doing, you need to know these things that I'm telling you. That's why I'm teaching you these things. Understand the concepts of what I'm telling you, because it will begin to play out in real life before you, and then you begin to make sense. Like you go into a Scrum meeting and you see developers randomly selecting user stories, right? In your mind, you remember when Abiola talked about in a Scrum, we need a Scrum goal. Every user story we're selecting in that goal must tie into the goal of the Scrum. Oh, I get it. That's why they skipped over these 5 user stories and selected this next one, because those 5 have nothing to do with the goal. Okay? And then when they finish developing that sprint, they pass it to QA. QA does the testing, right? And QA now says, okay, so we have this increment that we need to show to the business. You're not looking at them like, what are they talking about, increment? How am I supposed to show it to the business? Because now you understand that when we're building incrementally, we're building in pieces. We build a piece, we show it to the people who requested for it, we get feedback from them. If they say fix this, fix that, we take it back, give it back to the developers, tell the developers what they've asked us to fix, the developers fix it, and then we take it back to the business again. Okay, so like I said, nobody's going to ask you, oh, what is incremental? What is iterative? No. But in their day-to-day work, because they know the meaning of incremental and iterative as well, in their day-to-day work, they're going to work incrementally and iteratively. You as a BA, for you to be able to follow the logic of what you're doing, you just need to have the understanding of what I'm teaching. Okay? So I wanted to talk a bit more about iterative and incremental. Someone asked me, it was a question that came up yesterday. So I'm sorry I forgot your name, but I know someone asked me to talk a bit more about it. We had run out of time. So today I said I was going to talk about it. So 2 keywords, iteration and incremental. Let's use the example of building a house. We can always use any example, doesn't have to be IT. I'll use any example just to help us all understand it. So let's say the project your team is working on is that you've been given a contract to build a house, okay? When you're building a house, you typically would start from like the foundation, and then the other levels, whatever else needs to be done will be done. When you build the foundation, if you want to get feedback on that foundation, the people who gave you the contract, you want to know if they like the contract or not. At what point will you show them the foundation? Is it after building the foundation or after you've roofed the building? Can anybody make a guess?
After making the foundation.
Thank you. After making the foundation is the best time for you to get the feedback. Because if you build anything on top of that foundation and they come and tell you, no, this foundation is not deep enough, okay, you're going to have to rip everything apart. And if you rip everything apart at that point, you would have lost more money than if you showed it to them at the foundation level and you had to rip it apart at that point. And so that's what we call incremental building. Every increment is an expansion of what you built before. So that's example one. Example two is the build your burger that we used before, okay? You go to Subway, you want to order a sandwich. They'd ask you, what kind of bread do you want, what size? You tell them. Then they start putting the ingredients one at a time, asking you, do you want this? Do you want tomatoes? Do you want lettuce? Do you want this? Do you want mayo? Do you want ketchup or whatever else they put in there? Right in front of you, okay? They're asking you that. Imagine if they didn't ask you. They just say, yeah, I want a sandwich. And they're like, oh, totally, have a seat, we'll get you a sandwich. And then they go away, they choose the bread, and then they put everything inside, wrap it all up and give it to you, only for you to open it up and see that the type of bread they gave you is not even a bread you can consume. That would have been a lot of money lost because feedback was very late and that was not incremental. They built the entire thing before giving it to you. That is a waterfall type of approach. We do not do that in Agile. Now, let's bring it back to a project environment. What does it mean in a project environment? We're building this application. In that application, we're going to have register page. We're going to have login page. We're going to have buy a product page. We're going to have refer a new customer. We're going to have many different things, right? However, for us to be able to present all these different things I just mentioned to a client, we need a landing page. Like, what is the first page that somebody will see where they will then see register, log in, do this, do that? There has to be that page, right? In IT project, if we're building a project like that, what would happen is that when we design that page, before we start building all the extra things that need to go into that page, that landing page itself, we show it to the business and we say, give us feedback. Do you like the look of it? If they don't like the look of it, we want to hear it now. We don't want to wait 3 months down the line when we've built many different things and added many different things to it for them to say, oh, we don't even like the page that you built everything on. That's going to be 6 months wasted. Maybe you have 2 BAs on the project, 3 developers, 3 QAs. The average salary is about 15 grand a month. Imagine how much money has gone down the drain. And that is what Agile does not like. Agile says, if anything is wrong, I want to know now. Okay? And so what would happen in an Agile environment is that in this sprint, we've selected the user stories we're going to build. The developers will build it. When they're done building it, you always want to test a functionality before you show it to your stakeholders. Once the developers are done building it, they'll pass it on to QA. QA, they basically check the quality of what has been built. They're quality analysts, right? They will check whether a QA analyst, it could be a QA engineer, they have many different titles, but somebody will be testing it. Once they test it, if QA finds a problem with it, they would not even give it to the BA to give to the stakeholders. QA will return it to the developers and say, I tested what you built, it doesn't work, fix it. They fix it, they send it back to QA. When QA is happy with it, QA will then say to BA, actually the entire team says to BA, now we've done this increment. We want feedback. Oftentimes what would happen is that the BA will then be able to log into a computer to see how it works. Once you see how it works, you are happy with it because remember, you're the one who gathered the original requirement. So when QA passes it to you, QA is happy with it, you are happy with it, you oftentimes will then show it to the business. You book a meeting with them and say, oh, in this meeting, I want to show you the register page that we've built. In a meeting room or over Zoom, you then show them the page, you click here, you click there, you do a registration, you get the confirmation email, you show it to them. Sometimes you even just walk them through how to do it. You let them get comfortable with it. They see they're happy, they're like, oh, this is what we've been waiting for. Or sometimes they say, we really like it, this is going to make our lives easier, but we need you to tweak it here, we need you to tweak it there. That is an increment. Okay? How does that compare to iteration? Let's say you've then built this page, right? And it is not perfect because they've told you, fix this, fix that, right? We like these 10 things, but these other 2 things are not great. Or they like it today, but 3 months after they start using it, they realize there's something really important that they need based on maybe new business coming into the organization. But anyway, they need a change. That page will then be worked on again. It may even be under a different project because we're done this project, right? It will then be worked on again to improve it. Okay? So the first one I talked about, I hope I'm not even confused with the terminology, is the increment. The increment. So if you Google the word increment just means to increment something means to grow it. Right? So we give you one thing today, we give you another one tomorrow, we give you another one in 2 days. Those are increments. We're growing it, we're expanding it. Okay? However, let's say, going back to the example that I was giving, we now need to improve on something, or we need to I'll be real to you. An example would be the applications on your phone that I spoke about the other time, right? So iPhone rolls out an update. They didn't give you a new application to replace that existing one. They only gave you an improved version of it. When there's an improved version, that's an iteration. Okay? When there's an expansion, that is an increment. When there's an improvement, that's an iteration. Both of these things happen a lot in Agile projects. Because in Agile, we never focus on perfecting it today. What is the minimum that can work that will not cause us any problems? That is our focus in Agile. Once we deliver that, we begin to look for how to improve it. Of course, that minimum that can work has to be agreed to by the business, right? The BA doesn't just determine this is the minimum that would work, take it or leave it. No. Even the project team does not determine that. It's a collaborative effort. The stakeholders who have requested for this functionality and the project sponsor will agree on what is the minimum that would work. Okay? So you're doing this project that's going to span 1 year. In that 1 year, you're going to have multiple iterations. Because if you wanted to wait till you perfected each functionality, you will not finish the project in 1 year. And secondly, the earlier you get feedback, the easier and cheaper it is to fix it. And so that's why we never aim at perfection. When I say that's why we never aim at perfection, I don't mean you as a BA, because you're not the one building it. Remember, a BA never builds anything. But none of these conversations will happen without you being there. Hardly would you find a developer talking to the business directly. It just doesn't happen. And where it happens, it typically leads to issues down the line. And that's why businesses hire a BA and pay 150K, 200K, depending on the company. They pay you to be that intermediary. They really do not want the business talking directly to the developer, because they expect that you as a BA, when the business tells you something, you can sit down and think it through. If the business is going off track, you can rein them back in a respectful way. If the developers are not understanding the requirements, you can sit them down and break it down to the point that they would understand it. And in doing all of that, the goal is not perfection. The goal, like I said earlier, is what is the minimum that would work? And then over time, we'll continue to perfect it. We have 1 year for the project. Okay, we start with one functionality. We send it to the stakeholders so we can get feedback. While we're waiting for that feedback, we're building the second functionality. While the BA is working with the business to show them that functionality, get feedback, the developers have moved on to functionality 2. By the time the BA comes back, the developers are done functionality 2. If the BA comes back with functionality 1 and says we need to improve on it, then they take functionality 1, make the improvements before they start on functionality 3. And that's how iterative and incremental work hand in hand. We're growing it, we're improving it. We're growing it, we're improving it. We're not going to wait till we think it is perfect. As long as all the requirements that we have been given have been met, the development team is ready to show it. So when I say the minimum viable product, it's not that we did 2 out of 3 and we say go and manage it. No, we will deliver all of the 3. However, it may not have the bells and the whistles that they would have loved. They want a car, they will get a car, but we're not giving them gold rims. Unless they can prove to us that without the gold rims, they can't drive the car. So let's say we give them the regular rims. The BA goes to present it to them and they're like, oh no, we'll need gold rims and this is why we need it, that is why we need it, this is why we need it, right? If it makes sense and the project budget can cater to it, then the business sponsor will determine if we're going to do it or not, okay? And sometimes we've done functionality 1, we think we've met all the requirements based on what we've built, then we send it for review. But when it comes back, we realize that our interpretation was slightly deficient and there's a bit more work to be done. That happens as well. It doesn't mean the BA is terrible and they don't know what they're doing. As a matter of fact, let me be honest with you. I don't care how fantastic you are as a BA. You're never going to have it 100% all the time. There's just so much that goes on in a project environment. And what saves the day is that constant feedback loop. And remember, that's the responsibility of the BA. And that's why I said, don't get hung up on definitions. Understand, understand the concept of what I'm explaining to you. Once you understand the concept, it's just going to become a way of life. Nobody's going to tell you to define it, but it's going to help you make sense of things that happen when you're on a project. When it begins to happen, you'll be like, okay, yes, I understand what is happening. We talked about it in class. How comfortable are we feeling about iteration and incremental? Is anybody still lost? If you're lost, please, don't be shy. Just speak up. The class is too quiet. Somebody needs to say something. People, what's going on? Titi, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, you said to say something, so I said something.
Very kind of you. Very kind.
Hello?
Shola, hi. Your hand is raised. Shola, go ahead, please. We'd like to hear from you. Shola, we can't hear you. I think this is the Shola we couldn't hear on Monday. Do you want to pop your question in the chat?
No, this is not the Shola that you couldn't hear. That's not my hand.
Oh, okay. So it's the Shola we can hear. Okay, go ahead, please. Go ahead. Did you have a question? Shola, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
It's gone.
Okay. Stella, go ahead, please.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi, Stella. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Thank you, Abiola, for the. I just wanted to throw more light on the iteration. For the incremental, I understand that you kind of start from a stage and then you build on that gradually. Mm-hmm. There is an improvement, right? But I need to really understand the iteration.
So the improvement goes with iteration. Incremental is when you're expanding what you built. We build the foundation, then we build the structure. Sorry, I don't know a lot about building houses, but I can talk about sandwich, right? So in incremental, we take the bread. When we put the tomatoes on the bread, that's an increment. When we put the lettuce, that's an increment. Where we're working towards building a sandwich and we're building it step by step. That's an increment. That's incremental. We're increasing what we're building. That is incremental. Iteration is, okay, you are building me a sandwich. Then you give me the bread and you tell me, try the bread. Before I start putting every other thing on the bread to give you a sandwich, do you even like the bread? Tell me about the bread. So you try the bread and you're like, yeah, no, this bread is too hard. I need a softer bread. They give you another iteration of the bread. Now they understand your requirement better. You prefer soft bread. So the next iteration is going to be a soft bread. Stella, what do you think?
Hello?
Stella, hi.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Does that help? Does that explanation help?
Okay. Iteration is for each stage, I'm kind of testing. I would test to see if it kind of meets my requirement. Now you gave me that white bread and you give me to test. I test the white bread and at the end of the day, I found out that I don't like it because it was too salty. And then you did what we call a swap, or you did a change. And then you gave me something else. So for my own understanding is that testing is carried out at each stage of the project, right?
Yes, testing is continuous, yes.
Okay. All right, understood.
Yeah, the way they have a BA, they have a QA. When they hire you as a BA, they hire a QA, right? So when we do one iteration, they give it to the QA. QA tests it. It never goes to the customer until QA is happy with it. QA is happy with it. They tell the BA, oh, Stella, we're happy with it. Go show it to the customer. Then show it to the customer, and the customer says, oh, no, I don't even eat white bread. What you're giving that customer is an iteration, but the customer says, these are the changes I need you to make to the bread. When you redo the bread and take it to the customer, that's another iteration of the bread. Okay? Yes, thank you, Atinoke. Iteration is when there's an improvement on a product. When you improve it, that's an iteration. However, when you expand it, that's an increment. So when you think increment, think increase. Increment is to increase, okay? And then for iteration is to improvement. And increase and improve are two things that you constantly do in Agile. as you're scaling the product, making it bigger, building, remember you gather 200 requirements, right? You're not going to build the entire 200 requirements before you go present it to the business. So when you build the first group of 10, it's an increment, or the first group is the first group. That's really not an increment because it's the first thing. They still call it an increment anyway. And you go show it to them, right? They say, oh, we totally love it, but we need you to tweak 1 and tweak 8, right? So you need to go back and tweak it, right? When you go back and tweak it and you represent it, that is an iteration. But when you bring requirements 11 to 20, that's an increment. Because requirement 11 to 20 is an increase on top of 1 to 10. That is an increment. These two things need to happen, increase and improve, for you to be able to complete the 200 requirements at the minimum cost. Johan said, who chooses the pathway, iteration or increment? Is it the employer or the BA? No, it's not. That's not the way that I will phrase it. No, but as long as you're doing Agile, you must do iterations and increments. As long as what you're doing is Agile. It's not a matter of choosing the pathway. The organization chooses to be Agile. Once they choose to follow Agile methodology, both iteration and incremental will happen. It's not something anybody, the BA doesn't choose it, the employer doesn't choose it, the organization chooses the methodology. Okay, or let's say the project team with the project sponsor, but it's usually the higher ups, right? They choose the methodology they want to follow. Once you choose the methodology, it's almost like saying you're buying a car, an airplane. Once you choose an airplane, you automatically use aviation fuel. It's non-negotiable. And if you choose a car, then you use the regular gas. Hans, does that answer your question? Clara now, awesome. Justina.
Hi, Abiola. Thank you. I hope I'm not overthinking this, because each time I tend to understand, I keep confusing myself. So please bear with me while I just tell you what I think.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So iteration, you go back and say, do you like this? They say, yeah, make an improvement. We go back. But for sorry about that. Increment, you take it to them and they say, oh, good job, you can proceed 1 to 20. Or you don't take it back to them, you just go ahead and do 1 to 20 and then show them. So are you saying with iteration, at each stage or level, you have to take it back to them, in case there's a need for an improvement, while incremental, you just go ahead and build the foundation without putting the cement and saying, hey, is this the kind of cement you think would hold your foundation?
No, okay.
Exactly. I know I'm confusing myself.
Yeah, I see your question. Okay, so when you started your question, you said, so with iteration, do you take it to them and say, do you like it? That's not the purpose of an iteration. Okay. Do you like it? No, that's not the question. Even though that's part of the feedback you're going to get. An iteration is an iteration. Once you do a sprint, right, you're doing an iteration. Either way, you're going to complete one iteration. When you complete it, though, before you start building incrementally, you want feedback on what you've just built. So if you get feedback, and that feedback entails you doing more work, the next time you present it to them, you're presenting a final version of what you presented before, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're presenting like a refined version. Now, if there was a problem, you fixed it, right? Iterations would always happen in Agile, regardless. When you finish a sprint, you're completing an iteration. Even if you take it to them and they say you don't need to fix anything, that's the final of that iteration, the final version of that iteration right there. Okay? So they'll either say fix or don't fix. There are issues or there are no issues, one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
If they say there are issues, you're going to take it back and try to improve on that iteration and take it back to them again to show it to them. this is 1 to 10 that you've worked on before. You are only taking that 1 to 10. You are not going to add anything new. Apart from the fixes they told you to add, you're not adding anything new to it. However, let's say you move on to 11 and 20. Okay? That is an increment because 11 and 20 was not a part of 1 to 10. So even though 11 to 20, in and of itself, it is an iteration because you completed it in a sprint. However, it is incremental on 1 to 10. You cannot have number 11 without having had numbers 1 to 10. So just think of increments like this. You have a total of 10 tasks to do. When you do number 1, you completed number 1. Number 2 is going to be an increment on number 1. Number 3 is going to be an increment on number 2. And that's how you work in Agile, right? Because in Agile, you want to be fast to the market. What that means is you want to be able to show your customer what you're doing. Constantly. You want to be able to present something to them. And that's why we work incrementally in Agile. We don't wait till we've developed 50 user stories before we go talk to the customer. No. Even if it's 5 user stories we developed in that sprint, okay, that is 1 increment. When we take that increment, okay, when we take that, like that increment that we've done, and we show it to the business, and the business says, oh, we love it, but we need you to fix 1, 2, and 3. We take that increment back and we fix it. But we have to take it back to the business again. We don't just fix it and say, oh, we fixed what they told us to fix. We're not going to look at it again. We still take it back to them. When we take it back to them, that same increment that we fixed, when we take it back to them, it's another iteration of, so call the first one iteration 1.0. When we fix it and we take it back to them, it's now iteration 1.1. We have not moved on to 2. Because 2 is user stories 11 to 20. Okay?
Yep.
But now we have more, we are increasing the versions of the first iteration because we're making fixes based on the feedback we're getting. Okay? So the 2 always go hand in hand. When you're in an agile environment, you will continue to work incrementally and in iterations. You continue to improve on what you've worked on already while you work on new things. Just think about it that way. We continue to work to improve on what we've developed while we develop new things. Those 2 things must happen. You cannot choose one over the other. If you say, okay, let's continue perfecting what we've created and we're not going to start anything new till we perfect that one, you're not going to meet the project deadline. Do you understand? So that's why, sorry?
Yeah, totally. I understand.
Oh, you get it. Okay, good. I just want to take a quick look at some of what's in the chat. Moji sent a file. I haven't opened it. But again, if you Google increment and iteration, you're going to find a ton of information. Moji, thank you for sharing that. Atinike said, which is better used by a BA, iteration or increment in cases where there's a time frame? You have to use both. There's no better one. As long as you're in an agile environment, both will be used by the project team. The BA, the BA personally does not even use these things I'm talking about. It's the developers who are building incrementally and in iterations. The BA will then take what they built, show it to the customer, get feedback, and bring the feedback back. But both go hand in hand. Olabisi said, I would assume both will be required in all stages. Yes, Olabisi, you're right on point. From the beginning of the project till the end, what you need to think about as a BA is, do we need to improve what we built already? And can we continue to grow it? One must not suffer at the expense of the other because you do not have an infinite amount of time. Okay, so it's like a wheel and the oil. Both of them have to keep going together. Okay, Bumi said, Atineke, according to Abiola, both are used as long as the organization is adopting agile methodology. Right on point, Bumi, thank you. Shola said, I don't think it's an either-or situation. Depending on the feature you're working on, you will be carrying out both. Absolutely. You know what? I think we can even end the training now. because I think the class gets it now. Anyway, just joking. Adiola said, yes, both work hand in hand, so long as it's agile methodology. Absolutely. Shola said, one of the groups can use my computer issue as a pain point for the assignment. Thanks, Abiola. You answered my question. Stella and Justina have the same question I have. Yeah. Don said, so an increment can warrant an iteration, and iteration meets the definition of done. The first part of your question, Don, so an increment can warrant an iteration. Absolutely. One increment can warrant multiple iterations until we get it right. Okay. But the other part of your question, Don, I'm not sure I understand. You said an iteration meets the definition of done. Do you mean until an iteration meets the definition of done? If that's what you meant, that is correct. When we've done multiple of that iteration and it meets the definition of done, then we don't need to worry about that iteration anymore. Now we have a clean iteration that the business is happy with. Okay. Shola, to Abiola, I'm raising my hand for a question. Shola, we know you're raising your hand, but we can't hear you. Let's try again. Unmute, please.
Different Shola, I think. I don't know.
Oh, this is a different
Shola.
This
is a different Shola. There are two Sholas.
I see. Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead, please.
It's okay. All right. Okay, so this is it's not about iteration and incremental that we're talking about. But you mentioned something while you were explaining that. You said if we've deployed into production and business identified maybe they missed out something initially and they would like to add a feature or something, and that you can maybe like do a recall or something like that. I just want to be sure I got that right. Or would they need to write, would we require new user stories for that?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Shola, and I'm glad you answered it. So when I said that, I said it in the context of when you begin to work as a BA, one of the first things you'll find is that not everything is a project. Sometimes after you've gone live, there may be a need to implement just one new feature. A new requirement comes up. It's a valid new requirement. At the time you were doing the project, it was not a requirement. Or maybe it was a requirement, they didn't know about it, but this is a requirement that even the CEO of the company knows it needs to be implemented. That happens. I'm not talking about the type of requirement where this is a requirement that should have been a part of this project. Somebody didn't do their job properly, they missed that requirement. And then when they give you the requirement and you analyze it, you discover that it is not critical to the success of the project. Like they will be okay if that requirement is not delivered. Those are type of requirement that you just push them nicely and say, submit a change request. Even you already know that change request isn't going anywhere, but you tell them to submit it. If the project is still going on and a new requirement surfaces, and it's a type of requirement that will have major impact if you try to implement it, always ask for a change request. Don't sneak the requirement. Don't push it into number 100 and push number 100 to 101. Don't do it. It's not your problem. Tell them to submit a change request. When they submit a change request, you're not even going to be one of the people who would review it anyway. Let the powers that be review it at that point. But going back to your question, Shola, what I said was in the context of an organization needs to make a change. Project has gone live. This is something new that needs to be done. However, this is a feature we implemented during the project phase, and now we're just going to do another iteration of that feature. It's not net new. It's not something that has never existed. And that can happen during the project, after the project. It's just about timing. In IT project, a lot has to do about timing. How critical something is depends on when that thing surfaces. Does it surface at month 2 of the project or month 12 of the project? If it surfaces at month 12 of the project, that's a problem. You want to pull in as many people. Don't let your ears not be the only ears hearing about it. But let's say you just started gathering requirements 1 month ago. You're still in the requirement gathering phase. Because remember, when we looked at the project plan, there is a time frame for gathering requirements. So in that time frame of gathering requirements, a new requirement comes up. Even if it's in month 4, you're still in requirement gathering phase. unless this requirement is a requirement that will undo some of the work you've done, or it's the type of requirement that if you try to build it, it will break what has been built already. And yes, there are requirements like that. There are requirements like that. Let me see if I can think of a requirement. An example of a requirement would be, customers being able to make purchases with. So let's say your company is based in the US, right? So US dollar, but every time a customer wants to make a purchase in your company, they need to purchase in USD. According to the requirement that you got before, then somebody comes later on and says, oh, actually, no, because we have customers everywhere, they need to be able to purchase with pounds, with this, with that, and the conversion needs to happen and all of that. That one requirement I just gave you can take 3 to 6 solid months of building and testing. Because one, your system has to be able to do the conversion. Your system needs to know the conversion rates on the day that the purchase is being made. And many other things that go into that. So let's say somebody comes up with a requirement like that towards the end of your requirement gathering. Maybe they've even built the payment page already and all of that. While that requirement itself is not going to break anything, it's going to be a lot of work, because for the QA people that are testing it, right now they've built all their test cases around USD. Now they have to build for franc. Now they have to build for British pounds. Now they have to build for the yen, build for this, build for that. When they analyze the impact of that alone, we can already see that we're not going to meet the project deadline. You as the BA, don't be the only one hearing anything like that. Tell them to put it in writing and submit it. So shall I again, not to say over discuss that topic. When a change is requested is very important, and that's what's going to determine the approach, how you're going to approach it. But like I said, let's say this is a project that has already gone live and there's this new requirement that has come in. The organization needs to decide if they want to implement it or not. And if they're implementing it, you as the BA who worked on it a year ago, right, go and look at your requirements that you gathered at that point. Because now what you're going to do is to build on the requirements. You're not starting from scratch. Does that help, Shola?
Yes, thank you very much.
It does? Okay. Emmanuel, your hand is raised.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just want to reconfirm if this is correct or not. In terms of the increments, I want to believe the output of increments is basically the minimum viable product. Is that correct?
No, well, I don't want to say that is incorrect, but I'll put it this way. A minimum viable product has to work. It is something that must meet a need of the business. When you're developing incrementally, you're doing it in phases, but at the end of that 1 year, you are delivering an entire product. So when we say minimum viable product, something is not a product unless it can actually work. Like it can do the full process that it needs to do, right? So when we say we're delivering the minimum viable product, it's not just login. The business has asked for more than login. They've asked for login, they've asked for register, they've asked for this. Holistically, when we deliver that to them, we are going to make sure that we're delivering the minimum viable product for all of these functionalities they've asked for. One increment alone will not make a minimum, because what is the point of a login, of a register page when there cannot be buy a product page? Our company is not in the business of registration, we're in the business of selling. Do you understand what I mean, Emmanuel?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, great.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, Atinuke said, are BAs hired based on a proposed project, or are they basically part of the management chain in an organization or company? Both happens, right? Typically BAs who work as consultants, and that's what I do. I'm usually not a company's employee. I haven't worked as an employee in a long time. So they hire me for a project. However, companies hire BAs in-house. The BA is an employee of the company. The BA will be working there for 10 years, 20 years, and all of that. employee with benefits, we get benefits, we get all of this, right? So all of you would need to decide which path you want to follow. And if you start with one, you can go into the other later, right? You can start out as an employee and go into consulting later. You can start out in consulting and go into as working as an employee. I'll be upfront, consultants make more money. Because when you work as a consultant, they don't give you any benefits, so they pay you more. So when I talk about those jobs that are paying $100 an hour, they are consulting roles. However, if you were working as an employee and they're paying you $100K or $120K per annum, that is very good salary in an employee context. Because not many jobs out there pay $120K a year, right? But yeah, to answer your question, Atinuke, it can be either. It's really, at the end of the day, it just boils down to what do you want? Okay, awesome. Okay. I'm glad we got iteration and incremental out of the way. I know people may still have questions. My advice is Google it. Like, you don't even have to do any major research. Google it. Some articles out there are not going to be great. So try to read at least 2 or 3 or even 4 to get a sense of it. But like I said, just even understanding the concept is all you need right now. You know, get the gist of it. When you get on the job and you see how people are working, the developers are building incrementally, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I understand what they're doing. We're working on this increment. Once they've done this increment, once the developers are done working on this increment, they'll pass it to QA. QA will test it. One QA has tested it. It may be time for me as a BA to show it to the business. Sometimes you have to wait for 3 increments to show it to the business because only 1 increment may not make sense. Only 1 increment is not a complete process, right? And maybe at this particular stage of the project, the 3 increments together is what makes sense. Maybe an example would be these 3 increments is what deals with an employee making a purchase. We built it over 3 sprints. So you may have to wait for them to complete the 3 because when you're showing it to the business, you want to be able to show them the end-to-end of something, right? You don't want to show them something halfway. It's not going to make sense to them. As a BA, you're not going to determine that alone. When you meet as a project team, you say, okay, this is what makes sense, right? Let's show them the entire purchase process. Okay, this is split over 3 increments. So the BA would wait for the 3 increments to be done before you show it. Okay, Manuel, we're going to need to jump into today's class. I'll take your question and then we need to start today's lecture because we have a few slides to cover today.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Manuel.
Yeah, so thank you. So sorry for that. I was just thinking, again, based on what you also mentioned during this conversation about the fact that it is the responsibility of the BA to basically, shows the stakeholders, the users, the project sponsor, what have you, what is going to be delivered to the customer at the end of the day, right? And my understanding is that from the perspective of one of the ceremonies in Scrum, which is the review or demo, so whereby all the stakeholders are being invited, and the who demos the product basically at that point in time. So I think most time or sometimes it could be coming from the development team to demo this. So at what point does the BA now tries to demo? Is it compulsory that it has to demo to the stakeholder, or is it going to be the same development team as it's going to demo to the stakeholder?
Okay, so good question. The BA is part of the development team to start with. So we don't say BA or development team. The BA is part of the development team. And you're right. Oh, was I just echoing there? Sometimes the demo is done at that sprint ceremony, right? If you have a product owner, you may be demoing to the product owner. Not in every case do you have stakeholders coming to that meeting. In fact, more often than not, depending on the organization, they're not going to come to that meeting. So at the end of the day, figure out what the process is in your organization. Sometimes you're going to go to the office of the director and show it there. Or you're going to book a meeting room, invite the director in there, invite whoever that stakeholder is, the group of stakeholders, and show it to them. The developers are not going to be there. QA is not going to be there. It will be just you as the BA. So the key thing here is that Your organization already has a way of doing things. When you get there, find out how they do it. Follow the process, at least until you feel confident enough to be creative. Find out the process and follow it.
Okay.
This is where they want to do the demo there. Okay?
All right. Yeah.
That'd be my recommendation. Yeah, no problem. Okay. So let's quickly look at the slides we have for today. Share my screen here. We're recording, right?
Yes,
yes. Can you confirm? We
Yes,
are? Okay. Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen. So we're going to breeze through some of the things that I have on my PowerPoint today. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes,
Yes, I can.
You can. So yesterday we stopped at story point, right? A story point is a way of estimating how big a user story is. The team agrees collectively on the number or on how big or small the user story is. For a sprint, we want to know the number of points cumulatively that all those user stories are. By knowing how many points we're doing in sprint 1 and sprint 2, we can forecast how many we can do in 3, 4, 5. If our average is 20, then we know 20 is our comfort zone. Story points do not translate into hours. Developers don't like it when they ask them how many hours is it going to take you to do it. Even a BA won't like it when they say how many days is it going to take you to finish that requirement, because they're putting you under pressure, right? And whatever you tell them, chances that they're going to hold you to it. So in that meeting, when we're assigning story points, we're not thinking about time. We're thinking about effort. You know, how many people will it take to lift this couch? Not how long will it take them to lift it. Okay? It's not about time. We know that there is a time box because we're going to finish that sprint in 2 weeks. So there's still that concept of time. However, when we talk about the story point assigned to a user story, it is about effort, not time. And that's why, even though we've selected 5 user stories, one of them might be 1 story point, another one is 3 story points, another one is 4. Okay? Don't talk about time. As a BA, don't talk about time in that meeting when they're assigning story point. My recommendation is don't even talk. You're not the one building it. Don't tell them how long it should take them to build it. Okay? So a bit more about story point. Story point is estimated as a group. So always estimate as a group and estimate fast. Don't overthink it. Don't overprocess it. At the end of the day, even the best estimation is an educated guess. The first one is a guess. The second one is a guess. By the time we get to the 3rd sprint, we then look back and say, okay, we did 20 points in sprint 1, 22 in sprint 2, 21 in sprint, or 19 in sprint 3. Our average is 20. So for sprint 4 onwards, we're going to select a total number of, we're going to select user stories that have a total number of 20 points, basically. So somebody had asked about estimation methods yesterday. If some of the common estimation methods that teams use, one is called planning poker. So they give everybody a set of cards. Each card will have a number. When they pull up a user story, everybody with a card will raise up the card that has the number they think that user story deserves. So 5 people have cards. 3 people raise 2, 1 person raises 1, and then one person raises 10. The person that raised 10, either they are clueless or they know something everybody does not know. So it may generate a bit of conversation, right? Oh, why do you think it is 10? And the person will say, oh, to be able to build this, you're going to need to integrate A, B, C, and it will need a bit more text. And everybody will be like, oh, you're right. We weren't thinking of that. But the point I'm trying to make here is planning poker just involves, they give everybody who's going to estimate a card. And when they call the user story, each person is going to They may give you a card that has number 1, another one, number 2, another one, number 3, another one, number 4. When they read a user story, if you think that user story is a size 4, you'd raise the card that has number 4. Nothing complicated. Another one is t-shirt sizes. It provides an easy way for teams to associate values to, I'm missing a word there, to associate values to user stories. I'll correct that. I apologize for that. The team produces a range of story points that equal an extra small, small, large, extra large, whatever size, right? So when they call a user story, everybody will raise up the, they would indicate if they think it is a small t-shirt or a large t-shirt. If, let's say, they call a user story and people think it's an extra large, that user story is too big already. User story should never be that big. That's one of the benefits of the t-shirt size way of estimating. Then there's the Fibonacci sequence. In the Fibonacci sequence, the last place I worked where they used it, in the meeting room where we always have the project meeting, one of the boards in that room, they had written the numbers on it. So 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, and they list the numbers all the way to, I think it was all up to like 200 and something. So every time they call the user story, people will just shout out, not shout, but they indicate 2. If somebody thinks it's 3 or everybody thinks it's 2, somebody calls 21. Well, it's time for the person who said 21 to explain why they think it is 21. So again, don't get caught up in memorizing, planning poker, t-shirt size, Fibonacci. It is irrelevant to you as a BA. In fact, even to the developer, it's almost irrelevant. It's only relevant to the point that they need to understand if you say, we're using planning poker, then they know, okay, I need to raise up my card. If we're using t-shirt size, then they know, I need to indicate it's large every time they read the user story. That's the whole idea here. Nobody needs to memorize any estimation method. Again, when you get to the company, they would indicate, it is not your place to indicate it. They would indicate what estimation method. You just need to have an idea. So if all of a sudden people are shouting large, you're not wondering what's large, what are they talking about? Okay, now you have an idea. Okay, so let's quickly look at other terminologies in IT project management, and it may apply in other types of projects as well. Assumptions. In every project, there are always assumptions because you would never know all the facts that relate to the project. You don't have all the time in the world to do your analysis, right? And so you would assume something. Some things you would never know. You don't know whether developer 3 is going to quit 3 months into the project. You don't know. Okay? So what are assumptions? Factors deemed to be true during the project planning process, though proof of their validity is not available. Okay, for example, you'd assume that the 3 million that they budgeted for the project will be enough. It's an assumption. The hopes is that you'll be able to deliver the project in the 3 million that you have. But if 30% of your team quits, right, and it takes you 3 months to replace them, you're going to lose money in that time. Because the other team members, you have to keep paying them, even though the work that needed to be completed in that 3 months could not be completed. Okay? There are many things that can happen, right? But we would always assume at the beginning of the project, if we say it's going to take us 1 year, we will assume 1 year will be enough. If we think it's going to take us 3 million, we would assume 3 million will be enough. They are assumptions. Nobody knows that tomorrow. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Okay, what is a business process? It is a set of activities and tasks that once completed will accomplish an organizational goal. So for example, when we were talking to the accounting manager and they were telling you about this task that they do, that task or the series of tasks that they do, when they complete it end to end, it accomplishes a goal of the organization. That is a business process. So whenever you're talking to stakeholders as a BA, always think from a process standpoint. what is the process? When people are telling you things and it is disjointed, you're trying to understand it, but it's not coming together. You feel like they're missing pieces in what they're telling you. You go back to them and say, oh, when you told me this, I understood that part, but I could sense a disconnecting between the point 1 and point 2. Is there anything that happens in between point 1 and point 2? And they'll be like, oh, actually, you're right. There's something that happens, but I didn't think it was important to share with you. Okay? You always have to think from a process standpoint. A process needs to flow. It has a beginning, it has an end, and the in-between makes sense. There's a reason why we're doing it, and by the time we complete it, it should accomplish a goal. The process must involve clearly defined inputs and one output. A good business process will be repeatable. So when the accounting manager tells you, another question you may ask is, so how often do you do this? And they're like, oh, we just do it the one time and we never do it again. Okay, so can you tell me, why do you do it? What purpose does it serve? Is this something we can automate? You're not going to ask them that in that meeting. Is this something you can automate? But you as a BA, you begin to think about it. They have this random thing they just do once in a while. Who knows? Maybe they're doing it out of habit and they do not even need to do it. A good business process will be repeatable. A good business process will be finite. It must have a beginning and have an end. Not the one that continues, and then they'll be like, we now pass it to the finance department. And when you talk to finance, they now pass it to marketing department, and they're just passing it up and down, and it doesn't seem to have an end. Something is wrong. When you hear that, that's one thing you want to follow up on as a BA, because every good process must begin somewhere and it must end, and the end must be clear. It should be flexible, it should be adaptable, and you should be able to improve on it as needed, and it should be value-driven. There has to be an intention behind it. If it doesn't add value, it shouldn't exist. I don't know if you've worked in a place or you try to secure a service and they're doing it in a way that you don't quite agree with. And when you ask them, they say, well, that's how we've always done it. Okay, even though it doesn't make sense, it doesn't add value, but that's how we've always done it. That is not a good process. Other terminologies, again, this is just, CAPEX is something you just need to know about. It's money that a business spends on capital expenditure. We're buying computers, we're buying new servers, we're changing the sit-stand desk of the organization. It's just money spent on capital expenditure. Then there's change control. Change control is the process of basically evaluating and implementing changes to a project. So remember how we said, when there's a change, depending on the timing, tell them to submit a change request, right? The change request is submitted to the change control board. They have other names that they call them, but oftentimes it's called the change control board. And the reason why there's this board is that they need to be able to analyze and say, one, do we want to do this change? And if we want to do it, when do we want to do it? When do we want to introduce it? Do we agree that we actually need the change, but we are going to do it later in the future? Or do we need to do the change now? You as the BA, you're not going to be a part of the change control board. But at least if somebody walks up to you and says, oh, the change request that I submitted, what's the update? You can say, oh, it's currently sitting with the change control board, and I'm hoping to have an update for you in the next maybe 1 week, right? Depending on when the change control board is meeting. The change control board manages change control, right? So the people at the board, the process they go through, the analysis they do is the change control, making the decisions as to how and when or if we're even going to implement the change. Okay. Change management plan. This is a document that, basically details the process for change. Okay, and the main purpose of the document is to ensure that changes are managed according to procedure. We must have a procedure for change. For example, before any change is introduced, it must be approved by the change control board. Those are the type of things that will be in the change management plan. It's basically just a plan that talks about how change is going to be dealt with in the organization. And we've talked about change requests before. It's a formal document submitted to the change control board that requests changes to the finalized project management plan. Okay. So example of, let's talk a bit more about change requests. A new requirement surfaces on the need to be able to edit a transaction up to 2 hours after it is submitted. As a business analyst, what do? You start thinking about the impact. How is that going to impact time based on where we are in the project? How is it going to impact cost? Because usually, if something impacts time, let's say it's going to add 2 months to the project timeline, that's 2 more months that they have to pay the BA, pay the developer, pay the QA, pay the product owner, pay this person, pay that person, right? Impact to testing. QA is going to need to test more. What about the risk? If you say edit a transaction up to 2 hours after it is submitted, what if, so the customer makes a submission, they're trying to buy a product, and because we're very agile in our organization, we're able to ship the product out within 1 hour. Well, if the client is saying, the stakeholder is saying, we need to be able to edit transactions after 2 hours, there's already a conflict there. The stakeholder may not know that, but you as the BA should know. That's why you need to know your requirements well enough. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't even know that you don't know something exists. And that's why you talk to your stakeholders. When they tell you about this requirement, ask more questions. Why do our customers need to be able to edit their transactions up to 2 hours? And they'll begin to tell you more. Oh, they need to be able to edit it for this reason and that reason and this reason. So they give you all of that information, right? And then, all of this is going to be documented in the change request. So when they give you that change request and all they've written is the change, you're going to take it back to them and say, oh, we need a bit more information. But you can't tell them we need a bit more information if you didn't even know that you needed a bit more information. Okay, usually your company would have a template for change request. In case you're already wondering, where do I start from? What should I put in the document? There's typically a template, but people always feel the bare minimum when you give them a template. So if they fill it out and you feel like they've left out some information, ask them to put more information in there. And then you do your analysis as a BA, so that even if somebody in the change control board, your project manager might be a part of the change control board, and the project manager may ask you, so have we analyzed this request? What impact will it have? Because when that project manager is in the meeting, they want to be able to speak intelligently and not necessarily give you credit for it, but that happens. Okay. So let's see. So change freeze, the point at which scope changes to a project are no longer permissible. We talked about this, I think it was yesterday. Now we are freezing the ability to make change. We're not going to entertain any more change. If you want a change, maybe we'll be pilot B of the project. But in this pilot A, we're not doing any more changes. When you hear the word decomposition, what does it mean? It's a way of breaking down project deliverables into smaller components. They want this functionality and they want that functionality, and everything is just so humongous, something really big that they want. And we just break it down into smaller components. Again, just have an idea of decomposition. Nobody's going to ask you as a BA and say, go decompose. No, it doesn't work that way. You might be in a meeting where they're talking about, so we're going to be decomposing the ask from the business. You're able to follow the conversation because now you have an idea of what decomposing means. Gold plating. Gold plating is when we make changes that are outside of the original agreed upon scope. Gold plating would lead to scope creep. Scope creep is when, let's say in our scope, we've said that we're going to fly you to Dallas. That's what we've said we're going to do. In the money that we have, we can fly you in economy, max premium economy. You come and say you want to fly business. That is gold plating. You don't need to be in business to get to Dallas. We can get you to Dallas without being in business class. Okay, so keep an eye out for gold plating, right? Gold plating, literally what it means is, like they ask for a car, you give them a car, and then they say they want gold rings. Who drives gold rings anyway? But you'll be amazed at what business will ask you for. That is gold plating. It's the extra stuff, the feel-good stuff that we really don't need. It's not part of the minimum viable product. Okay? Always move away from gold plating. Keep an eye out for it. It will come. I've never worked on a project where they didn't try to gold plate. You as the BA needs to know the difference in between what needs to go into the minimum viable product and what is icing on top of the cake. Like what is extra that we truly do not need for the product to work. Issue log. An issue log is basically a document where we capture existing issues, right? On that document, we're going to indicate the issue. We're going to indicate the date it was reported, who reported the issue, who's responsible for fixing it. Like, who's the owner? The person may not even be the one fixing it, but that's the person we're going to go to if that issue is not fixed. And then the severity. If the severity is low, we know it's less priority. We want to deal with the high severity and urgent priority, right? So you're going to look at both the severity and the priority. If its severity is high, priority is urgent, that's the first thing you should be addressing, right? And then you want to look at the medium and high, and then the low and high, right? Again, it's just a log. Oftentimes it's not maintained by the BA, may even be maintained by the project manager, but at least if they say, can you take a look at the issue log and tell us how we're doing? You know what an issue log is, right? Hopefully you know where to find it because they will tell you where you can find it. And if it happens that they tell you to be the one maintaining an issue log, this is a template. The one your organization uses may be slightly different, but you can see it's nothing complicated. Somebody reports an issue, we put it in the issue log. And then we continue to update the status. Once it's resolved, we close it. If we're currently working on it to fix it, we put WIP. WIP means work in progress. We're currently working on it. And if it's new, we haven't started working on it, we put new. This is an example. Doesn't mean the one for your organization is going to look like this, but at least it gives you an idea of what an issue log would look like. Return on investment, we talked about that when we looked at business case, right? It's basically the expected financial gain of a project. Okay, how profitable is this project? We don't want to spend 1 million on a project only to make 500K. That's a loss, right? Like even in real life, if you go into a business venture, you want to come out better than you went in, right? So what is the return on our investment? What are we getting for investing this 3 million to implement Salesforce or this new application? Risk, okay? When we talk about risk, there are multiple things we look at. One is risk appetite. What is risk appetite? It's the amount and type of risk an organization is willing to accept in anticipation of gains. The amount and the type. However, risk tolerance is the amount of variation in performance measures that an organization is willing to accept. So think about it like when you're driving a car, right? You are passing through a zone where the maximum is, let's even just use the example here. Your risk appetite ranges from 0 to 70 miles per hour. That is the amount of risk your organization is willing to accept to achieve its objective. Anything more than 70%, we're like, that's too risky. Even if we're going to make 10 million, we don't want it. It's too risky. So that's your risk appetite. Your appetite ends at 70. However, your risk tolerance is the acceptable deviation from your appetite. So the way to think about that is you're passing through a zone, you're driving, and the speed limit is 80. Okay? If you're doing 83 and a cop flags you, you may get away without a ticket. You're 3 miles per hour higher than the risk appetite of that road. But let's say they flag you down and you were doing 100, you're getting a ticket. In fact, you may be getting a booklet, right? Because you've exceeded the tolerance of the road. You know, the word tolerance, what can I tolerate? When you tolerate something, it's not something you are happy about, but you know what? Okay, I'll tolerate it. Okay? And that happens in IT as well. And then after risk tolerance, we have the unacceptable risk. So our risk tolerance is 70 to 75. When you go above 75, you've entered the unacceptable risk, the unacceptable risk level. At that point, you may even lose points on your driving license. So let's bring that back to IT project, right? We want to implement this new tool. We've identified risk in there. Of all the risks we've identified, we've said, if these ones happen, we will take it on. We know we will come out standing, we'll be fine. Of these ones that we can accept, if more than 5% of 5% extra happens over and above our appetite, okay? We won't be happy about it, but we will tolerate it. However, if more than 10% of our appetite happens, that has become unacceptable. If 70% of the project team quits, that is not a risk we can accept. We may need to shut the project down, find out what has gone wrong, fix that issue, and start again. Every organization has their appetite and their tolerance and what is unacceptable. Again, as a BA, you do not define it. You may contribute to the conversation, but you do not own it. You know, it won't be your job description, and you are not going to be responsible for all of the risk. Okay? So let's look at strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. Okay? It's called SWOT analysis, right? Every organization at any point in time, they want to know their strength, they want to know the opportunities in their industry. Those are good things going for them. And they want to know the weakness and the threats that they are faced with as well. So let's look at a bit more detail here. How we do it for time. Okay. A bit more detail here. So SWOT analysis is a model that we use to understand influencing factors, you know, maybe in our industry, in our business, right? And how it may affect an initiative that we want to roll out. So to be able to know the strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat of the organization, you may need to have a brainstorming session. Remember in class 1, I said that a lot of what a BA does, a BA does not, you don't create them, you don't own them, but you carry them. You initiate the conversations, you get people talking, and then you lean back and record what they're saying. So even when you want to know the strength and the weakness, the threat and the opportunity, oftentimes you schedule a meeting with the people who have that information. Okay? What are strengths of an organization? Strengths are things that the organization does really well. For example, the employee base is solid, highly knowledgeable, the processes are well defined, they have good customer relationships, right? Weaknesses are things the organization does not do well, or they don't even do it at all, even though they need to be doing it. Okay, that may be a pain point. Opportunities are things that are external to your organization or your group, but that you can take advantage of. You know, there's a new market your company can key into. There's a new application that if your company buys it, their business can be improved. Threats are external factors that can negatively affect your business, your organization, your competitor, right? People who want to run your company out of the market. Okay, typically when a document is being prepared for management, when they're trying to make all these decisions on this is how much money, you know, this application is going to cost us $3 million and all those things, when the project manager and the BA and stakeholders are meeting and putting all this information together, sometimes you include the SWOT analysis in there. Let management see the threat that they're facing in case they're not aware. Let them know of the weakness that the company has. Let them know of the opportunities that can be leveraged to grow the bottom line. And that's the whole idea behind the SWOT analysis. Do not sit down alone in a room and try to come up with strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat. No. Meet with people who have that information. If you don't know the people, ask your project manager. Your project manager is responsible for the project. Ask them. If you don't know who to talk to about somebody, ask the PM. If the PM doesn't know, the PM should ask the project sponsor. Okay? So again, this is just a picture of, SWOT, some of the questions that a BA can ask to be able to get people talking so the BA can get the information that they need. I'll leave you to look at this slide when you get the PowerPoint. KPI. KPI is the way we measure success, right? KPI is key performance indicator. You establish the KPI before the project begins. And as you progress in the project, you begin to look back at the KPI to see if you're achieving it. Let's look at a few examples of KPIs, or even before we go into the example. So a KPI is always connected to corporate goals. The organization, what is the goal of the organization? KPI should be tied to that. KPIs are decided by the management, not by you. They're not decided by you, the BA, but you need to know the KPIs. You need to know. Once management decides it is documented, it's just going to be one of the documents you're going to read when you get on the job. And KPIs are easy to understand. So let's look at a few examples. An example of a KPI is that the number of unresolved issues must not exceed 25. Issues found in code review. Code review is when the code, the programming that developers built is being reviewed by other developers, by somebody else to see if their code is clean, if their code is good. Okay? Issues found in code review must not exceed 50. Issues found by QA must not be higher than 15% of the sprint stories. Okay? These are like lower level KPIs. Some KPIs are a whole lot higher than this, like they're tied, like eventually you can link them to the corporate goal. Okay? So customers raise issues, right? They bought your products and they call when they have an issue with the product. At any given time, we must not have more than 25 issues that have not been addressed. Okay. Design decision. I think we're almost done here. Okay, good. Just 2 more slides. So design decision, the concept of design decision is that when you're working on an IT project, as you begin to gather requirements, let's say you meet with the accounting department and they tell you this requirement. But when you meet with the marketing department, they tell you their own requirement, and the requirement the accounting department gave you and the one the marketing department gave you do not go together. It has to be one or the other. Okay? So in that situation, a design decision needs to be made. We need to decide what design we're following. So let's look at an example. This company has an employee base, right, of 100 people. Employees can take vacation. When they take vacation, they still get paid even though they're on vacation. Alternatively, employees can take vacation, they won't be paid, right? And they will take the money later on. Later in the year, they just say, pay me the money. They like to get their money in December. This process is manually managed because some employees will take paid vacation, others will take unpaid vacation and then take the dollars later. With this new project that we're implementing, as a matter of fact, the reason we're implementing the project is that we found out that the current way of doing it is not in agreement with the collective bargaining agreement. A collective bargaining agreement is a document that unionized environments follow. So if you've ever worked in a company where they have union, you hear them say, oh, the employees belong to a union, right? There's usually a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, that guides what the union does. We've realized that our current way of doing it does not agree with the collective bargaining agreement. Okay? The collective bargaining agreement, so in the future state, vacation bank payout will only be allowed if the collective bargaining agreement governing that location or that department allows vacation payout. So if for your department, the CBA governing you allows vacation payout, you will be able to take payout. But if the department you belong to, the collective bargaining agreement governing you does not allow vacation payout, you will have to take paid vacation. We are going to let the collective bargaining agreement decide on who will take paid vacation or who can take a payout later on. Okay? Remember, the way we're doing it today is that employees can choose what they want without looking at the CBA. Now we need to make a design decision. Do we implement the new system but keep the old way of doing things, or do we implement the new system and be consistent with the applicable collective bargaining agreements? Typically, they will tell a BA to create a document called a design decision. In the design decision, you itemize the two scenarios. Alternate scenario 1, maintain status quo and follow the current process where an employee can take vacation or payout as they wish. The pros of that is that the employee is familiar with it already. You don't need to do any change management, and we have happy employees. The con of that is that it goes against union agreement. Alternate 2 is to abide by union agreements. The advantage of that is it aligns with union agreement. You don't want union problem. The downside of that is that you're going to need change management, and employees may not like the option that their collective bargaining agreement offers them. Your place as a BA is to prepare this document. You are not making any decision. Once you prepare the document, you submit it to the powers that be. They will make the decision. The decision they make is what will inform the next step, the option that we are following. That brings us to the end of lesson 4. Okay, people, so we've covered a lot here.
No, Abiola, I think there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, 1 second, I'll get, okay, yeah, no, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead. If there's a question in the chat, let's go for it. We don't have a lot of time, but we'll get through a few questions for sure. So I'm opening up the chat now. I'm just trying to see what the first question is. Okay. Shola said, is it a good question to ask during an interview what estimation method the company used? I would say no, that's not very relevant because the estimation method they use is what they use anyway, and it's not going to change. In an interview, the expectation is that you're asking questions that will tell you enough about the company for you to decide whether you want to be with the company or not. And their estimation method is not going to stop you from working with the company, because estimation methods are just what they are, t-shirt sizing, who really cares, right? Excuse me. Let's see. Moji said, is gold plating done by the development team and scope creep? Moji, do you mind telling me your question? I don't think I understand it. Moji, are you there?
Hi, Moji, I think you can unmute.
Hi, Abiola. So my question is, isn't gold plating done by the development team? Because I think what you had said, you made it seem as if it's the business that is requesting like additional features. But my understanding of gold plating is the development team. So let's say, for example, there's a feature that you want customers to be able to make payment with MasterCard. Mm-hmm. And then the developer is thinking, oh, since they can make payment with MasterCard, maybe I should also including functionality where they can also use Visa. So that's my understanding of gold plating, that it comes from the organization, from the development team, and not from the business.
Yeah, so you make a good point, Moji. Gold plating can come from anybody. Gold plating, you're in the requirements that you documented as a BA, gold plating can be embedded in there. Anybody can ask for extras. In my experience, actually, most of the requirements that would result in gold plating comes from the business. They want all the extra stuff. But to your point, it can come from the developers as well. They want to put in the extra to make it look good, even though that extra isn't really needed. It can come from anybody.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
It can come from anybody, yeah. Thank you. Atinike says, so for an organization with KPIs, it means the BA or employees are subject to appraisal. I mean, so consultants generally are not subject to appraisal. They're not appraised, But yes, employees within the organization, and if the BA is an employee, employees are always subject to appraisal anyway. But in regards to KPIs, right? The reason for a KPI is we have these goals we need to meet. Are we meeting them? And if we're not meeting them, what do we need to do to meet them? And yes, oftentimes it's tied to appraising employees, right? All those companies that would say, we're paying you 100K, but there's a 20K, what do they call it? I don't work as an employee, so it skips my mind. There's a 20K, there's something tied to performance that if you all meet the goals, then you get the 20K, right? Oftentimes it's tied to the KPI. Manuel said, Moji agreed, goal plating is also freebies for the client by going above and beyond what's out of scope. Yes, so Moji, you're correct. Developers can do goal plating, but oftentimes developers don't even build what's required of them completely. And so they don't even get to the point of goal plating. Again, in my experience, I'm sure that in other places, maybe the developers just have so much time on their hands and they're building extra stuff. In my experience, though, it's really been the request coming from the business. Okay. Don, you said incentive, but you just wrote the word incentive, so I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
No, I thought you were looking for, the word you were looking for was incentive.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Bumi, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Abiola. Thank you so much for the class. So in line with your explanation of change control and change control board, I have a very big question. So how can a BA handle like a difficult stakeholder, especially like when the BA is trying to maybe obtain a sign off, like the BA has like documented the requirement, has gone to like write the user stories and now comes back to the stakeholders and they say no. How can a BA like handle that kind of situation?
Okay, Moji, that's a very good question, but we're not going to answer it today. We're going to talk about it. I believe possibly the next class is where we're going to talk about stakeholder management. It's a very important question. So if I don't bring it up, please remind me. But let's tackle it during stakeholder management. We don't have enough time to cover that today.
Oh, okay.
We have a deal on that. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Justina?
Hi, Abiola. I'm just hoping my question is not a silly question. Anyways. Okay.
There are no silly questions, Justina. There are no silly questions. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So my question is about story points and user story. So I don't really understand the rationale behind story points. Like when you say, okay, let's use the T-shirt, for example, and someone says large or small, and then is that the effort they are going to put into the user story? Or I don't understand the rationale behind using points for stories. And the stories that have lower points, does that mean you discard them or?
No, you don't. So let me try to quickly answer that in the 1 minute that we have.
Okay.
The reason why we need to assign story points to user stories is that we have a finite amount of time in a sprint. Typically 2 weeks. There's only so much we can do in 2 weeks. So if we're not careful and we select 5 very complicated user stories and put it in that sprint will fail. We don't want a sprint that would fail. And that's why we gauge, so the first sprint, we don't have experience working together yet, right? So we just try to gauge and select a few user stories, assign points to them, right? And we come up with 4 user stories. One has the size of 7, another one 3, another one 5, and the fourth one 5, right? And that's 4 user stories, 20 points. Let's say at the end of that sprint, we got through only 10. Okay? Now we've learned a few things. Number one is that 20 and 10, they're two completely different things. So we overestimated ourselves, right? When we can't pull off 20. And so when we want to do the next one, because we can't make a decision based on just one sprint, but we're going to choose user stories that have a cumulative point closer to 10 than 20, because we failed at 20, right? So let's say this time around, we try 3 user stories, they're like 5, that's 15. And we made it happen. So the first one was 10, the next one was 15. Our average right now is about 12.5. When we get to sprint 3, we know that we don't want to do more than 12.5 because that's our velocity. That is our speed. If we don't assign points to user stories before selecting it and putting it in the sprint, there's no way we're going to know if the 3 user stories we selected are 3 massive user stories or 3 small ones. So by first taking that step to assign a point to the user story, it keeps us in check to not put more than 12.5 in sprint 3. So when we say how many points for this user story and everybody agrees it's a 7, right? And we put it into the sprint, we know that we only have room for 5.5 more. So any other story we're putting in or stories we're putting in cannot be more than 5.5. But if we don't assign a point to the user story, how will we know if it's 5 or 50? So the only reason we're assigning points to it is to be able to determine how big is it and can it fit into this sprint. If it is too big to start with to fit into any sprint, it tells us we need to break it down. We need to decompose it before we put it in any sprint whatsoever. Justina, does that help or did I confuse you more?
No, it does. A lot. It does.
It helps?
Yes.
Okay. We've gone past by 2 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I think we got through a lot of questions today, right? And we went over things that people needed more information. So I hope you found it beneficial. We do not have a class tomorrow. Take some time, work on your presentation. While us on Tuesday, we're still going to meet on Monday anyway. So while you're working on your assignment, feel free to even post in the group chat if you have a question, Howard. Olaide, did you? Okay, I thought you raised up your hand, and, have a fantastic weekend.
Bella, I actually did raise my hand, but I don't know. I just wanted to confirm, I know Monday is Labor Day, and I know that the last public holiday that we had, and Black Thursday works. I just wanted to confirm if Monday is going to actually work.
So, Olaide, are you trying to tell me you don't want a class on Monday?
No, that's not what I'm trying to say. I just want to prepare
I'm
my
joking.
mind.
I was joking. Don't take me seriously. You know what? If there will be no class on Monday, I will post it in the group. And
okay, so
Baba Tokbe or somebody is going to communicate to you.
Yes. So does that mean that our presentation will be on Wednesday or will it still be on Tuesday?
Either way, your presentation is on Tuesday. So if we end up not having a class on Monday, but you have any questions, post in the chat. I'm going to respond anyway, whatever the case.
All right. Thank you.
Okay,
don't worry. I like to hear your voice. I want to have a class on Monday. I'm just asking.
And I was joking. I know you love class. You love BA, right? Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. We'll connect on Monday or Tuesday.
Viola, just before we end the class, I was wondering, are you still going to share your slides today?
Yes, I will send it to the group leaders who will send it to the rest of the team.
Sounds
good. Tengu, you get the slides this weekend. If not, you get it because you need even the other slide, the business case. You will need it for your next assignment. So anyway, I'll get it across to your group leaders and they'll share with you.